Going live. Donner? Donner party of 50? Donner?
Is there a Donner party out there?
Is there a Donner in here?
For those of you that don't know, Donner refers to the Donner Party, and the Donner Party is a wild tale. A tale of tales, one might say.
A wild tale.
A Wild West tale, maybe. Would you
Not
say
like
that?
Five-O Goes West, where it's nice and friendly, and the mouse, wins against the cats, and
Yeah,
there's no
to
cats
be fair,
in
though,
America.
Five-O West had Five-O West.
Five-O.
Five-O.
Yeah.
He went through some tough stuff. He did. He had a little battle there
He's
himself.
the late son of Forval.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys,
Ooh.
so this is episode 47. This is Curtis.
47.
75.
75. Super close.
Sorry. I was thinking about how many people were in the Donner Party that died and survived.
Ooh.
Okay, so, guys, this is an interesting Halloween podcast that we're bringing to you.
And this is a little change up because
Mm-hmm.
every once in a while, I would say more so Curtis than I, but he forces me to learn some things about something else, which I forced, coerced,
Yes.
manipulated, things like that to learn. But this was a fun dive, and we wanted to do it last week. It was kind of a crunch. We didn't really want to. It's still, to be honest, going into this, there's so many different sides of this story. There's so much information that we both took in, read about, listened to, all that there is zero chance that we are going to get even a snippet of the information. But we want to bring to you what we saw in this, things that interested us, kind of give you a peek into this, because I think I shared last week, I was a little confused because it's super close to Dahmer. And I've heard of other people say is that the serial killer? No. This is 1846 Donner Party, Old West style, coming out west. There really is no California to speak of. The Oregon and Washington territories had less than 30 people living in them at the time that were settled. I mean, 30 people that were white. Let's be real.
Right.
But 30 settlers that had come out. I mean, that's wild to think, right? That's 1846.
West,
that's
baby.
3 people ago. And 4 people ago.
Yeah.
There was 30 people here, and now, there's at least 2,000.
So I'm going to kind of start, guys, and give you a little bit of background as far as this party and the situation goes, okay? So the group consisted of 87 individuals, okay? 87 individuals that had decided that they were going to travel from the east.
So to back up, though, it didn't start out with 87. It started at Springfield was where they kind of left
Springfield, Illinois.
But then where the party got that large was when they got to their next stop, and they met up, and it became the Donner Reed Party. But everyone knows it as the Donner Party, and that's when we had 87 people.
Yes. So the main group, though, eventually turned into 87 people.
Ish.
But so the reason that they were traveling west is they believed in this concept called manifest destiny.
Yes.
And manifest
which is a
destiny
wild thing.
Is a wild thing, and it's a pretty, I'm going to just say it, pretty much like a racist kind of mentality in a degree, where they believed because they were these Anglo-white Christians,
right,
that they had the destiny. It was God-given right for them to claim any territory that they saw fit that was west of basically the Mississippi. Yeah. So the leaders of this group were
is it James Donner? I don't remember his first name.
No, it was Mr. Reed.
Yeah, it was just called Mr.
Mr. Reed and Mr. Donner. Okay.
Yeah.
And they both were fairly wealthy individuals.
Reed more than Donner.
Yeah, but they both had a pretty good income.
But did you see sketches of Reed's wagon?
Double-decker, baby. So
double-decker with a full kitchen and bunk beds. And he had 3 wagons. 2 of them were for storage. This dude, this was also fun fact. One podcast I was listening to had some cool facts. One of the facts was chuck wagon. Those had not been invented yet, which would have been the full wagon that people would have, because the gold rush, all that kind of stuff. Like I said, there's only 30 people in the Oregon territories. So this is pre-giant wagons, but the chuck wagon was a guy. I have it in my fun facts, but you're gonna love this. I wrote this down
Lansford.
just for you.
Oh yeah.
Not that guy. The chuck wagon was invented by Charles Chuck Goodnight. He was tired of bad food on the trails, and so he bought a government wagon and converted it to a cookery to cook meals for people that were on the trails, and it became donned the chuck wagon, and that's where we get our modern day food trucks.
That's crazy.
Was this dude on the trails?
Awesome. That's awesome.
Anyway, sorry.
Well, so another kind of crazy thing, we're going to be throwing out some interesting facts about this, but another interesting thing about the Donner Party was that it was almost accompanied by one of the most famous human beings from the United States ever.
Right.
So Abraham Lincoln briefly considered going with them actually at this time. Because while working as a lawyer in Springfield, Illinois, Abraham Lincoln was a really good friend of James Reed. So James was his first name.
Right.
Of James Reed.
That's where I got the James.
Mm-hmm. And they first met, Abraham Lincoln and James Reed, they first met many years prior when they were messmates in the Black Hawk War.
Really?
So they were
Black Hawk helicopters, right?
Yeah.
That's where they came from?
Yeah. But when Reed actually started having financial trouble at one point, Lincoln was his lawyer and kind of counseled him before he started getting bankrupt, basically. So he helped him through that to maintain some of his wealth and stash some of his wealth away. And so Lincoln
came in handy, apparently.
Came in handy. So Lincoln was about to go on this trip, but his wife deterred him from doing it. They said, no, I don't want you to do it. And the reason that those people were going to the west was because they were actually aiming for California. Okay.
Right.
So the whole purpose of this group was to go to California to claim land and to be able to claim wealth by having that land.
Was it his wife or Don? I think it was Donner's wife that wasn't doing well. They thought that the weather would do. No, it was Reed's wife. That the weather would do better.
Right.
But another interesting fact about that group was her mother-in-law didn't want to be left. Her only remaining daughter, I believe, was Reed's wife. And she didn't want to be left without her. So she accompanied them, but she had consumption.
Right.
As they left on the trail, which is, for those of you that don't know, I didn't know exactly what that was, is tuberculosis. A fairly transferable problem.
Communicable.
Yeah. And there were
deadly disease.
There was at least 4 or 5 people that died of consumption due to this woman coming with them on the trail. She probably did not wear a mask.
Probably didn't. Probably not.
Right.
Probably not.
So already, right off the bat,
they're in a tough spot with that group.
They're in a tough spot. And then you were going to say about Lansford Hastings.
Yes. So
tell me about him a little bit.
The group basically got some really bad directions.
Right.
So Lansford Hastings was an early California land promoter, basically.
Right. Self-proclaimed trailblazer.
Mm-hmm. So he had written a really popular book at the time called The Immigrant's Guide to Oregon and California.
Right.
And besides containing a ton of inaccuracies,
which were not because he didn't check them out. I mean, they were because he didn't do them.
He wrote many shortcuts in the book, but he himself never actually went on any of those shortcuts. He just had heard about these potential shortcuts and then claimed them as truth in his book. And the book was really popular for people on the East Coast that fantasized and dreamed about going to the West Coast.
And Donner had this book with him on his wagon, across.
They were using it as the key direction guide to get to
And they
California.
were essentially trying to seek him out. They were trying to meet up with him to take this, what was it called? The Lansford, or the Hastings Cutoff is what it was called. And
so basically what ended up happening, instead of taking the known tried and true trail, the Oregon Trail, basically, that would take them across and avoid some of the Sierra Nevada heavy snowfall regions
and deserts,
they ended up trudging through really harsh terrain. Okay,
very harsh.
So the party gets collected. They get all of these individuals that agree to go. The main financiers are the Donner Party and then the Reeds. So they get the group together, they start traveling, and they end up realizing that these shortcuts, quote unquote, are actually taking them a lot of extra time.
Which is interesting because the book had made claims that this trail, I mean, he painted it as the smoothest thing ever. Great for wagons, great feed for oxen, easy trails. It's going to be super easy. It will shave over 400 miles off of your trip, which if you're moving 12 miles a day, it would cut 3 weeks off your trip to California, which is I mean, anyone looking at that says, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. I mean, there was a 2-year-old. That's the youngest kid that I saw on there. If they didn't have any on the trail, that was one of Reed's kids. He had a 2 and an 8-year-old who would have been 1 when they started.
Right.
So these are little kids that they're trucking across. I mean, you can imagine if you drive across the United States now in a car, it's annoying. But can you imagine in a wagon with little kids? 3 weeks is gold. I mean, that's like striking it rich.
Right.
But they were warned along the way. They at many the stops that they stopped at, people said, "Do not take that route. You will not live. You will not make it. Your wagons will not make it." And they did not. There was a group of theirs. Part of the Donner Party did split off and go north towards Oregon, but the predominant Donner Reed Party turned left and took out across the Sierra Nevada desert,
right,
which was their first big obstacle, and it took way longer than it was supposed to. They lost tons and tons of oxen. They lost like 3 wagons, which I don't even know how you do that, but like, they get swallowed by like a sandstorm
or stuck in actually sand
or
itself.
something. Well, probably they couldn't pull them because they didn't have the oxen to do it. But they ran out of water. They took water for like 6 days, and it took them like a week, or it took them way longer than 6 days, like 2 weeks or something like that. So imagine you run out of water 6 days in, and you're screwed in the desert.
Well, so before they even, basically, like Jordan was saying, they trudged through the Sierras, or through the desert. So before they get to the actual mountain range, that is the main,
this is all pre that
stopping point where they actually create the quote unquote Donner Party, the large group that has to hunker down in the wintertime.
Well,
before they get to that
group became that group when they split off and went through the desert. They weathered that first storm together, but they hadn't gotten to the spot where they really got stuck yet.
So what some kind of key points is, right before they get to that main spot where they get stuck, the leader or one of the main people, Mr. Reed, actually has a pretty wild situation that happens.
Correct.
Him and another fellow, their 2 wagons and their oxen somehow
got a fender bender.
get in a little fender bender.
Yep.
And
they got entangled.
Mr. Reed starts arguing with this other guy.
He got slightly PO'd.
So this other guy gets so pissed at Reed. And Reed, for a little background on him, he has a very harsh personality, according to historians. He's not easy to get along with. He's not a nice guy. He has a lot of wealth, but also he's kind of a punk to talk to and to just kind of communicate with. So the guy gets so pissed at Reed that he starts beating and punching and like meleeing on Reed. And Reed said, "Oh, hell no. I'm an old vet. I've got a lot of power, but I'm not going to let somebody just smack me around." So Reed grabs his knife, pulls it out, jams the dude's chest with his whatever K-bar knife.
Yeah.
Didn't have K-bars back then, but
maybe they did.
Maybe not. Probably not. No, they didn't. But jams him in the chest with his knife, and the whole group is so like shocked that Reed just killed this dude.
Right.
So they're like, "Why? What are we going to do about this?"
Right. So that starts they have like a trial in the desert or pre-desert.
I think it was after the desert.
So he had weathered that storm. So so they have this trial, and they kick him out of the group. And what does Reed do? He leaves his family with the group and heads north.
Because the group gave him 2 options. Essentially, they said, "We will either kill you, hang you." They actually had hung a noose off of a wagon post or whatever.
Yeah.
They either gave him the option, we'll either kill you, or you leave this group and we'll give you, and you get no weapons. They said, "We'll give you no weapons. We'll give you no extra resources or food. You just leave right now."
And so he goes on to make it to Fort Sutter, which is San Francisco-ish area.
But before that, his wife and I think it was his daughter. His daughter snuck off actually in the middle of the night.
I didn't hear about that.
Caught up with him and gave him a rifle.
Ooh.
And gave him like a little bit of like beef jerky or something like that. So
that's
Reed,
amazing.
the former one of 2 major leaders of the group, is now not part of this party anymore.
I don't know that we covered that. So it's interesting that it's called the Donner Party. Like most people don't know it as a Donner Reed Party.
Right.
Tell me why. Why didn't they call it the Reed Party? I mean,
I think it's because because they at that time after Reed had left, the group as a whole had to decide who's going to be the leader.
But prior to that, they had picked a leader, and they had picked Donner.
Because Reed
as
was
the leader.
because Reed had such a negative personality,
And he was rich. So people they were turned off by his wealth.
Yeah,
and they didn't
he was pretentious about it.
And so they didn't want him to be the leader, which is good at this point because they didn't have to nuke their leader.
Right.
They had a leader. He was a leader per se because he had a big family that was in that group, but they sent him off. And the long and short of his story is he makes it to Fort Sutter. He's fine. He fights in the
Fort Sutter, guys, just so you know,
American-Mexican War.
The big crux of this whole entire trip is the Sierra Nevada mountains,
right,
and then getting close to a heavy dumping of snow in the wintertime.
Right, because they left a little late.
So Reed got an advantage as far as he didn't have to slow down with the wagons. He didn't have to slow down with all the kids. He didn't have to slow down with all the animals.
But he left his family.
Because they were going to kill him if they didn't. And then so his plan was
why couldn't he just take his family?
His plan, because he wasn't allowed to leave with any food. He wasn't allowed to leave with any weapons. He wasn't allowed to leave with anything. So he's like, my family is going to at least have resources. They're going to have...
I already lost my mother-in-law, which, by the way, she died along the trail prior to that.
So he now is like, okay, he made it over the Sierra Nevadas by himself.
Yes.
But it wasn't quite as heavy of a snowfall at that point.
Right, because he got there way quicker.
So Reed is now in California. This large group it would have been 83 people, I think now. 83 people are still traveling towards and getting closer to Sierra Nevada mountain range. Reed, while he's in California, is waiting for his family to cross. He's a former major in the military. And at the same time as this is all going on, the U.S.
There's a lot going on, guys.
You know what? We actually want to keep California for ourselves. Right. So the United States goes to war with Mexico over California, essentially, and part of New Mexico or something like that. I'm not that great with the war history.
So that's what's interesting too. I don't know if you read about this, but so Lansford Hastings, the writer of this book that they are using to follow on their amazing trail that they're about to encounter, he actually had the goal of being in charge of California.
Right.
He wanted to settle it as his own.
The book to try to bring people to
But
California.
he was also working with another guy, which I can't, I had his name written down here. But anyway, he was working with another guy who actually, he was like an immigrant, like German-born Irish immigrant, some sort of like weird thing, got Mexican citizenship so he could get a land grant in the California area to work with Hastings. And so they were trying to get people. Hastings would go out on the trail of people going to Oregon and try to say, hey, go to California.
Right.
So the more people he get to go there, he wanted to be the dude in charge.
Yeah.
And what we're watching here is the fall of Hastings' clout. Like his image is being wrecked by this party as they slowly dwindle. And it's about this point, it's November.
It's getting November-ish.
So November 2nd, it starts to snow and they've hit the mountain's edge.
The larger group now has hit the mountain's edge.
Right.
Reed is continuing. He's still fighting in the Mexican-American War. And the party is getting to the point where their resources are incredibly low.
Well, they get stopped.
They get stopped, and they're actually at a point now where they actually had met up with Hastings. Hastings actually had met up with that group.
Yes.
And said, hey, I want you to go on this specific
path.
Said,
hey, that one in the book, not so great.
Right.
But this one over here looks really good.
Yeah.
So not only had he not been on the other one and didn't know, but there were people that... So now he sent him on this other one, which some other people prior to them had gone on, and it had been reported that no wagons could get through.
Right. So Hastings actually met them in person and said, hey, we want you to take this path of the Sierra Nevadas. The larger Donner Party decided, okay, we're going to listen to Hastings. So Donner, the actual leader, said, okay, we're going to listen to Hastings. Hastings actually then loaned 2 Indian scouts or helpers to help the Donner Party then travel over the Sierra Nevadas. So Hastings goes back to California. The 2 Indian guides stay with the larger Donner Party.
Right.
Then... in early November, mid-November,
they have to abandon wagons.
The larger party wakes up one morning and
3 feet of snow.
There's 3 feet of snow, and it's heavily continually dumping.
Yes.
It's getting heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier snow. Now, at this point, 5 people had already died just previously from either when Reed stabbed the dude in the chest or from consumption. So they already have several people that have died. But the group is already really low on resources.
Right.
So the group, the snow keeps accumulating, keeps getting heavier. And the group thinks to themselves, okay, we need to send a separate party from our larger Donner group party over.
So prior to this, so they got there in the 3 feet of snow. They did have to abandon their wagons and put their stuff on oxen and go on. But they were about to experience nearly 30 feet of snow. That's when the provisions start to run out, and they got to the point is November 6th. Almost all their cattle have been killed, and that's when they decide we need to send some people for stuff.
And the name of that group is called the Forlorn Hope.
Or also the previous name for them was the Snowshoe Group.
The Snowshoe
Which is
group,
funny
right?
because they sent, I think it was 17 people.
16 or 17, yeah.
And they were like 3 snowshoes short. So like 3 people just had to walk in the path of.
And those people, I believe, actually turned back.
No, they did not.
Did those ones continue with?
They went with the guides, and they went on, and only all in all, 7 of them lived, but they're the first ones that reported the turn to cannibalism, because they got a little ways in, and there was a guy, Charles Stanton, who had helped to find the guides, who'd helped to go get resources originally. So he's like a big guy in this group.
So we'll pause real quick, guys, because we're throwing a lot of information real quick. The Donner Party, the larger group of individuals, is still, so we're looking at about 45 to 50 people are still camping on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevadas. The Forlorn Hope, this group of 17 people, are going over the Sierra Nevadas with extra resources that the larger group had given them to try to make it over, because the group as a whole didn't have enough resources to make it over.
Right.
But if they combined their resources, gave it to this group of 16 people, they could send for help and ask for a rescue party.
So they had set up 2 camps, actually. I'm looking through my notes now that I gave you a chance to
they were like within distance, and like a mile.
One, if you want to look up these places, one was Truckee Lake, and the other was Alder Creek Camp, which is actually founded because someone broke a wagon wheel, and that was 6 miles back. So the 2 groups were about 6 miles apart from each other. The snow was about 3 feet deep, as we covered. The provisions started to run out, killed most of their cattle. They began to eat their pets. So like dogs were being eaten. They began to eat their shoestrings.
Mice.
They started to tear pieces off their rugs. Pretty much anything they could boil down. They would boil down the leather for their rugs to make like a glue soup, which sounds delicious. And they boiled bones so many times that they became so brittle that they actually just chewed the bones and ate the bones.
Now that was going on the entire time that this party of the Forlorn Hope was trying to make it over the Sierra Nevadas.
Not actually. So it was December 16th is when they send out the Forlorn group. So they were there about a month.
Yeah.
Or a little more than a month.
That was continuing. They were continuing to have limited resources while the Forlorn Hope was traveling over.
So all this happened, and then they sent the Forlorn group. I thought that they'd sent it out, but I looked up the dates, and so November 6th is when they finally got stuck. November 2nd is when they got stuck. November 6th, they'd killed almost all their cattle, and then it wasn't until December 16th that they sent the group out in snowshoes, the Forlorn Hope.
Right. But I'm saying like the Donner Party was still was struggling.
Oh, for sure. But all that struggle had happened, and then they were finally like, let's send out these. So these guys are emaciated. They're hungry. They're tired, and then they're going to go snowshoeing.
So this group has to make this super physically challenging activity, crossing the mountain range. They're freezing cold.
Yes.
They're burning through an enormous amount of calories.
Right.
Well, as they're traveling across the Sierra Nevadas, they wake up one morning after a heavy snowfall, and they find that, I believe, 3 people in that party are dead. They look around, and they try to decide, are we going to eat these 3 people?
That's not the Forlorn Hope group.
Yeah, the Forlorn Hope group eat 3 people because they have the Indian...
I know, but that's not where it started. So the original talk before anyone died, it was, and I wrote it down because this is bananas.
Because let's see if we got the same facts.
Charles Stanton so this is a guy that helped early in the beginning. So 6 days in to this Forlorn Hope group getting out there, he was he didn't feel well, and he was trying to get the group to go on without him, and he made the statement, "Take me along as provisions."
Okay, so
And so they said, no, we're not going to do that. We left him for dead. And so they left him for dead, and they went on, and then they began to think, maybe we should have brought him for provisions because they didn't have him. So then they decided that they would draw lots.
Right.
And so
yes,
this is how it works. So they would draw lots, and whoever drew the short straw was the person they would kill, and the person who drew the second short straw is the person who would kill that person, but they never went through with it.
Right.
But then the first person died, and they decided to eat it, and his dad was actually in the group, and they had made a decision. So like, but everything's out the window.
When they died, I believe when they died, there was one or two people. When they woke up one morning, somebody had died.
It might have been later, but the first dude that died, they had decided, they'd made rules about eating people. Relatives wouldn't eat relatives.
Right. Yep.
And so the dad was there, and so he didn't get to eat because it was his son who had died.
Ugh, bonkers. Well, so they also get to a point eventually where they were running out of meat from people that had died on this group. So, but what was interesting,
I think what you were talking about was because so people understand at this point, like, let's pause for a second. There's so many different accounts of this, and there are still people digging into this, like literally digging into these areas. And some of these cabins that these people built and everything, it's still not understood which ones were used. So but
we're not at the cab. We're at the
no. But I'm
group.
saying, like, because of that, there's so many different stories, and like you and I were talking about before, immediately after this happened. So, and we'll resume kind of where we were, but immediately after this happened, this went from like a story that people were reading about in the newspapers to complete folklore legend, like nearly overnight. And so the stories grew as to what happened.
This is why it's kind of hard for Jordan and I, because we both did so much research into this, and we are hearing different stories.
Yes, because one of the rumors is, and I'm sure that you heard this too, is that the reeds turned right and all left. And that's why they survived, that they didn't even go to the mountains. But that's not true.
Right, that's not true.
We know that from letters, that wasn't true. But that's just one of the stories that was told, that you can go to some websites and they state that as fact.
Yeah.
That the reeds didn't go.
So let me get back to the Forlorn Hope group. So one thing that was really interesting is that this group, the Indian scouts, decided to go with them to try to get extra resources for the Donner Party. So the Forlorn Hope, with this the Indian scouts had actually decided, listen, our culture and our people, we are not comfortable eating humans.
Right.
We're not going to partake in eating this human flesh. So these Indians actually started starving faster than the other group. So
someone warned them.
Well, at one point, the group as a whole was kind of frustrated with these Indians, and they started talking about, hey, should we
just kill them and eat them?
The Indians and eat them.
Right.
And so somebody within the group, they believe, warned the Indians, because after they woke up the next morning, the Indians were gone.
Right.
Well, eventually, I don't know if it was a day or two later, eventually they saw tracks. They saw bloody tracks.
Right.
As the Forlorn Hope group did see these tracks. And they found, actually, eventually, as they followed the tracks, the two Indians that were, I don't know if they were resting by a tree or by a river or something like that. And they were super emaciated. So the group actually...
See, that's where there's different accounts.
There's different accounts.
So there's one that says they were dead. They found them dead and they ate them. There's one that says that they were emaciated and they killed them and ate them. Mm-hmm. There's another one that just said they found them
and killed
them and ate them.
So, but from the majority of the resources that I saw, it was those people were killed.
Yes.
And eaten.
Which it sounds, if I were to lean one way, I would say that. Because your chances of eating like a bunch of sick people is less than like, I'm hungry, I'll eat you.
Yeah.
Either way, it's the situation. You just don't.
So as the Forlorn Hope group continues to travel onward, more people end up dying.
Yeah.
And more people end up getting eaten.
Yes.
It started with 16 or 17 people. By the time they actually get to
Fort Sutter,
it ends up being
7
people remaining. The people are so emaciated, so hungry, so starved. The only thing they can say is bread. They're begging for bread. But their stomachs had shrunken so much that they could barely handle a bite of bread or a bite of jerky, because their stomachs are just so shriveled up that they take days and days and days to get rehabilitated to a point where they can even communicate what they need, what the situation is. So eventually they do start communicating, hey, we have this group of 50 plus remaining individuals in the eastern portion of the Sierra Nevadas that are buried in 30 feet?
30 feet.
30 feet of snow.
So that's one thing that we do know for sure. And this is interesting because I actually went and looked at pictures of this. So to build these cabins, because there was a cabin already there, because there was a group that had tried to go over and couldn't get through either, that had built a cabin and had lived and been fine and wasn't this bad. But they built other cabins. And so they still, if you go there today, you can see where they chopped the trees off.
Also, I want to give a shout out to my mother-in-law. She actually went on a Lewis and Clark Oregon Trail kind of tour.
Yeah.
And on the way back, she went down south, went over the Sierra Nevadas, and there's actually a monument to the Donner Party on the eastern Sierra Nevada portion where you can go and read the history and look at different areas.
That's cool. So that's where there was a guy I was listening to just recently who was there, and he said so the monuments are there, and he goes, this monument is actually wrong. We've discovered recently. This was not the cabin that they stayed in. It was flip-flopped. And the only reason they thought that is because somebody had come in and like cleaned up before they were able to like record what had happened. And so now that they've done more excavation and figured out where most of the human remains are, their location they don't think is correct anymore.
They thought like where one party was at a different area.
Where the monument is at is actually not right.
Oh, interesting.
According to what they've discovered today.
Yeah. So anyways, the group decides we're going to get a rescue party. At the Fort Hastings, they said, okay, we're going to compile a group of individuals, or we're going to compile a rescue party to bring resources to the Donner Party. And so I can't remember the name of the individual, but he's like a mountain man. He had some type of training in the mountains, whatnot.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember hearing about him.
They try to take some animals and some resources to get to the Donner Party. So finally,
there's 4 different groups that ended up going there before they're done.
A total of 4 rescue parties going back and forth.
Some of them didn't even make it all the way. That's why there were so many.
Right. Some of the groups didn't make it all the way, but the mountains were so filled with snow and so treacherous. By the time they actually got to the Donner Party and started to try to bring them relief, those people that were rescuing them were now without resources.
Yes.
So they were in such a tough way that when they would started to travel back with individuals to trying to rescue them, the ones that were healthy enough to actually move and travel, the rescuers were so low on resources that they were actually eating their own shoelaces.
Yep.
They were eating their own, whatever, not raw hides, but animal hides and all this stuff too.
I had heard one account that said, like it was like a letter that someone had written, one of the rescuers, that when they came upon the lake, that they didn't think anyone was there, and the snow was so deep that they did see people. They started to make noise,
right.
And the people came out of the ground, and they said they weren't even recognizable. They were so like starved and famished and just out of it from being out there that they didn't even know where they came from. They came from holes in the ground because it's 30 feet deep of snow.
Isn't that crazy?
And
30 feet deep
like
of snow.
Kids and all that. And then there's just like they're cooking people. Like, and that's just I can't even imagine being one of the people stuck at the lake, let alone the people coming in to help out with that. I mean, someone had to do it, but can you imagine the PTSD that would be from that? I mean, like what was it? We were talking about this before we started to record, that one of the rescue parties, there were so many of them, they had to leave like 4 people behind to bring the rest of the people back. And when they came back, like there was one guy left, and it was just like carcasses.
Right.
And he was cooking.
Right.
He was cooking human meat.
Right.
But he had other things to eat, and like he said, he preferred to eat that meat instead. And it's like
his whole, he had gone what do they call it, rabid.
Just nuts.
He had gone rabid.
I mean, and you can't really fault him too much. I mean, it's a crappy situation. But so in the second search party, Reed finally went back to find his family,
so
thinking they were dead.
Yeah, the guy that was originally kicked out of the party finished part of his war that he'd done with Mexico, and then decided, okay, I'm gonna go help my family now, because word had gotten to him that they were stuck now. So he went back, started to basically try to help the survivors and the people. Now, what's interesting is when he got there, he actually saw all these emaciated and, really in a bad way individuals. The guy that he had gotten into a fist fight with, or
not that guy.
Not
that guy's dead.
The guy that wanted to hang him. The
Yes.
guy that had made a noose and tried to say, hey, I vote we hang Reed. Reed actually helped rehabilitate that guy in that area, gave him a bath, clothed him, got him all in a good way, and then helped him travel back.
So there was
across the mountains.
one account, and I didn't write it in my notes, and I can't remember which one of the party members it was, but I was like, it was the story that struck me, and I really, really wanted to go find. I'm sure there's no way to find out, but he had come to one of the groups he had sent his children ahead, and he went to go get them, and he walked in, and he said, "Where are my kids?" And they said, "Well, we ate them."
They were,
and he said to the guy, he wasn't going to kill him there.
Yep, this is crazy.
He said, "If I ever see you after we're out of here, I will kill you.
If I ever see you in California, where they're
kill you.
I'll kill you." Which I mean,
yeah,
the dude ate his kids.
It sounded as though he was like, "Well, it's not my kids. I'm going to keep my kids alive."
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, Reed gets there, and his 2-year-old and 8-year-old and his wife survived. They made it.
The Reed party is the only party
besides his mother-in-law. They suffered 0 losses.
That had 0 losses. And there's also, it's believed, it's not proven, but there is rumors. The Reed party is not only the only one that didn't lose individuals, but they were the only ones that also didn't eat humans.
So that's a
Did
rumor.
You hear that rumor?
That's a rumor
Did
about how they live. That is no.
I know.
Yeah, that's rumored. But everyone that I listened to and everything that I read said there's no chance. Like they wouldn't have survived.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's a very common thing that you read as far as they were the only ones that didn't.
So here's some things kind of following this, because that's like they rescued them.
Yeah,
who
rescued
was left?
them. So the total numbers we ended up having,
Yes.
as far as those that died, survived, those that made it in and out. So in the end, 41 people died, and 46 survived. Which actually, for how terrible that situation was, I'm kind of surprised that 46 survived.
It was like, man, I can't believe all these people didn't die.
So 5 perished before reaching the Sierras.
Right.
35 died at the camps or attempting to cross the mountains.
Correct.
And 1 died just after reaching the valley at the foot of the western slopes. But many of the survivors, lost toes, of course, frostbite.
Yeah. So
chronic physical, psychological damage.
The Reeds suffered no deaths. All of the Donners died. Every single one of them.
Well, didn't one of their children survive?
Nope. No Donners survived. Now, get this. Two-thirds of the women and children survived.
Right.
But 2/3 of the men died.
Yeah, I was thinking about
everyone over 50 died.
Yeah.
So
it was infants. It was infant, so really, really young, I believe, died, and then elderly were higher risk too.
Which 50 would have been elderly at that time.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And this halted a lot of the immigration to California. It nearly stopped after this story broke, basically.
Right. Of cannibalism.
Of cannibalism and just the death along the trail. And good, because Hastings was currently writing another book on how to travel through Mexico.
To Brazil, wasn't it?
The
Foreigner's Guide to Brazil?
Something like that, yeah. Was writing a book to there. This pretty much nuked all of his credibility completely. And he went on to be like some lowly bit. Like he wasn't even like a big businessman anymore. He just he got blamed for this.
Yeah. And kind of rightfully so, though.
Totally rightfully so. Yeah. I mean, you kind of got to think like, well, they should have maybe done their research, but they didn't have Google then.
Right.
They were like, well, we need, they were seeking out a new hope, new prosperity, new land, a new life.
Manifest destiny.
And here's the deal. Where they got stopped was 150 miles from their destination.
But 150
insane miles. But that to come all that way to be stopped 150 miles short and totally not be able to make it.
Bonkers.
Like no food. They abandoned their wagons. They had clearly abandoned all hope. And
they needed a new hope.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that was mostly the highlights, very superficial level of the Donner Party. But guys, I knew nothing about this Donner Party other than the rumor of people eating people.
I thought they were Jeffrey Dahmer.
And Jordan thought it was the Unabomber. Yeah. That's what he thought. He thought it was a Unabomber.
Yeah, totally.
Situation.
Yeah, but it was interesting. So go take a look at it.
Take a dive.
I at least have one of the links to one of the main podcasts that I listened to for basically just a timeline, and then kind of took a deep dive into some other stuff that I read and listened to and stuff.
Well, guys,
on it, but it's a great. It's not a really uplifting story, but
it's good for Halloween. But it's Halloween,
it is true. It's very interesting.
Week-ish.
It's a different time. I think it's healthy to talk about these things. I was talking to my son the other day about things like this. This got me to thinking. It was like, we have a lot of comforts in the world that we're in that afford us things that were unheard of during these times.
Right.
That, you know.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Not only like modern medicine, but we have heat, we have running water,
HVAC,
we have electricity.
We don't, or in this situation, we have airplanes.
Yeah,
for traveling.
In this situation, it's not super hard to immigrate places.
Yeah.
Although I was thinking,
highways.
Like, you say to like immigrate to another planet, like maybe it's manifest destiny. You get there and you realize, oh, we're just running at another race.
I guess that would almost be equivalent if we were like taking a trip to the moon.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
except if you get stuck, you are super more screwed.
Granted, it's maybe a little bit more extreme, I guess, moving to the moon.
I always wonder why they didn't go backwards in this story.
Why they didn't retreat back?
Yeah.
Well, I think they knew it was so much farther. The distance they had to travel to get back, they knew they didn't have enough resources to get back. And it was winter
they didn't
all
have
over.
Resources to stay there or go forward either.
Right. But they knew they were closer.
But if they'd gone back, there would have been less snow. Like,
because there was 150 miles to get to the end versus,
Oh, I get
4,
it. I probably would have done the same
4,
thing, but I'm just like,
2,000.
Hindsight's 20/10. But like,
yeah,
why not, go backwards where the snow is not as deep, and at least you could hunt back there.
Yeah.
Because it was rumored that they shot a wolf. They shot and killed a wolf.
Well, there was a couple
point, there was a guy that the guy killed a bear with
yeah.
a musket. I mean, that's like horrifying.
Pretty badass.
Like, it said like. I've read like a letter that he had written that was like thought that it would more so anger him than anything. I mean, people shoot bears with big guns,
right?
Muskets. I mean, it's like a BB gun.
You got it right in the sweet spot,
I guess. But and they ate. But I mean, they were there for. I didn't realize how long they were there until I started looking at the timeline. I was like, holy crap! They got stuck in November, and it wasn't until like February 5th that they sent the first search party.
It's bonkers that anybody survived, really.
Yeah, it is.
Well, guys, that's our Halloween story. I think that's the most of it, the most details we were going to give you. I'm excited, though. If you guys have any other type of like historical stuff you want us to breeze over, or crazy stuff that you didn't know much about, let us know.
Weird us out.
We'd be happy to throw it at you.
This was definitely weird.
It was weird. It was good for Halloween.
It was. I really enjoyed it. It was a good different.
You got any juicy shower thoughts or TILs this week?
I have some TILs. I also have one political thing to throw out there that is a good Halloween thing. Trump's Twitter got hacked.
Yes, it did. Very easily as well.
Very easily. So a security expert, actually, I shouldn't put air quotes. He was a security expert. Guessed his password of MAGA 2020
Wasn't it his
exclamation mark.
Was it his fourth guess?
I don't know, but someone else had guessed it years ago, and it was "you're fired."
Oh, that's hilarious.
So it's not the first time. It has no two-factor authentication on it. Probably does now. Interesting.
It's insane.
Yeah. So I have a couple TILs here
for
you.
Hit me. Well, you go one, then I'll go.
Today I learned. Besides this week, I learned about the Donner Party. TIL that in 1734 a Chinese official was sentenced to death by waist chopping. That's where they cut you in half. After being cut in two at the waist, he remained alive long enough to write the Chinese character. I won't even attempt to speak it, but it means horrible 7 times with his own blood before dying. After hearing this, the emperor abolished this form of execution.
Whoa.
And look at the character. Not an easy character to draw, right?
Oh my gosh.
He wrote it 7 times with his own blood.
After being chopped in half.
That's how long he lived.
This is terrible. Well, on that same note, Today I learned that the cone snail, which is just a really tiny looking snail, it is one of the most venomous animals on Earth. It releases, this is fascinating, it releases a cloud of insulin when a fish swims by, causing it to go into hypoglycemic shock.
Whoa. That's amazing.
Which then immobilizing it so it can inject the fish with a cocktail of up to 200 toxins. So it immobilizes it with a shot of insulin, making it go hypoglycemic. Then it shoots toxins in it to kill it.
What if it swam through its own hyperglycemic mist?
I guess it's got a really good, glycemic reservoir.
I guess. Whew. Today I learned in 1980 that the FBI formed a fake company and attempted to bribe members of Congress. Nearly 25% of those tested accepted the bribe and were convicted.
Oh, no. When was that?
1980.
Ooh.
Not that long ago.
Well, good. Get them.
What's funny is now, all the people that did it before the pandemic, they knew the shutdowns were coming and they sold all their stuff and didn't lose their money.
They got to get those guys.
Lock them up.
Yep.
Waste chop them.
Terrible. All right. I only have 2 TLs. Today I learned, this is interesting, that the I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but like the crunchy bits in toothpaste, or when you kind of grind your teeth, you kind of get that little gritty from it. It's actually microscopic little silica glass.
What?
Yeah, it's called diatoms.
I don't like that.
And it's used as fine abrasive material that kind of helps clean the teeth and take the plaque off. Isn't that interesting? So you're putting like little silica glass fibers in your mouth.
I'm not a fan of that.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, I don't like it.
Interesting.
Shower thoughts. Everybody thought having a calculator on you at all times was going to be a game changer, but the real shit is having a flashlight.
So true. Both of them are fantastic.
I don't even use the calculator. I ask Siri.
Oh, I use them both. Love them. Toasters were the first devices to have pop-up notifications.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Or one of the first.
There's a never-ending waterfall of poo hidden inside of every skyscraper.
That's a good one. If you were to make yourself invisible, you would also go blind because light could no longer be stopped by your eyes.
Oh, that's true.
Kind of cool.
So your eyes would have to be seen too.
Right. Yeah. Just floating eyeballs.
Unless you're invisible.
Dude, I have to pee so bad.
We're going to get through these.
Let's power through.
You're going to be fine. There's a certain point in everyone's life where how high can you count changes from a matter of knowledge to a matter of will.
Very true. Very true. This is something I thought about when reading books to my kids. The ugly duckling story is stupid because he was only accepted once he was a swan.
It's true.
That's a terrible message. I'm only going to accept you once you're beautiful.
Is that what you tell me every day?
That's what I think every day, Jordan.
The number of guys that sit when they pee must have exploded when smartphones came out.
I love that. That's a good one. This is the last one I have. The pickpocket industry probably has had a really rough year this year.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Ooh, I have a couple more.
Okay.
People who drink and claim to be drunk are never as drunk as the people who drink and claim to be sober.
So true. Very true.
Paper actually has 6 sides, but we don't realize it until you start stacking it.
Oh, yeah. That's true. Interesting. Good point.
And my final one, you're going to love this. Movies always have T-Rex with thunderous footsteps, but modern elephants, giraffes, and large birds walk silently. T-Rexes could silently stalk you.
That's a terrifying thought and a really good point, too.
Yes.
That's hilarious.
Oof.
Guys, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate
Curtis has got to pee.
I'm going to go
boop, boop, boop.
pee like a racehorse, and I don't know if I can make it to the bathroom. We'll see.
See you guys.
See you guys.